Hey everyone, I hope you're all keeping really warm and safe during lockdown. It's really freezing in Joburg, so I hope everyone is warm. My name is Aliki Saragas-Georgiou and I am a documentary filmmaker and a photographer. I did my undergrad at Wits, where my love of documentary really started with the documentary exchange program. And then I moved to UCT and I did my master's there in documentary arts. What I'd love to really talk to you all about today is really one of my passions in the form of documentary, which is impact storytelling. So that is really making a documentary film, whether it be long or short, that uses the medium of storytelling and the medium of cinema and artistry in order to make some kind of respectful and authentic change in the world. For example, a documentary called Whose Streets did amazing impact work on the ground in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. This is especially relevant now and today with what's happening in the world and the US with the death of George Floyd and others. And this film, for example, can be used again as a tool within the current activism. So when I was in the midst of making my first feature-length documentary, Strike a Rock, I was fortunate enough to be chosen on Doc Society's Good Pitch. So this is a really amazing initiative and I urge everyone to apply if they can. So Good Pitch is really where films who want to create an impact campaign pitch to potential partners. So myself and my Primrose and my Tumeka, the protagonists in my film, and one of our impact producers, Kathleen, went to pitch in Kenya in 2016. That really helped us develop and implement our impact campaign. And a lot of what I'll talk to you about today is found in what the amazing people at Doc Society have created. Their Impact Field Guide and Toolkit is going to be one of the main resources for this video. And also just a lot of trial, error, learning and experimenting. All right, so let's get to some key points of impact filmmaking. Documentary makers are really storytellers and storytelling can inspire change. So unlike shorter forms such as news, journalism, and social media, long-form documentary really takes the time to build empathy more deeply, involving audiences directly and immersing them fully in the situation of others, prompting them to engage and to act. Neuroeconomist Paul Zak has demonstrated the effect of storytelling on the brain's chemistry, as it increases level of cortisol and oxytocin, making us more likely to take action. Documentaries also help create culture, and culture leads to change. In working with film, we don't write policy recommendations, we really create cultural moments, and that opens up space for change to happen. Thirdly, because filmmakers can see a story and an issue in a new way, we can sometimes see what others can't and provide much needed focal points and bring together coalitions and partnerships that have perhaps never previously existed. And of course, bring new audiences to an issue as well. So before we continue though, I'd like to point you all to an article written by Sonia Childress, which is called Beyond Empathy, which I think is a very important point to keep in mind if you want to make authentic impact that truly benefits the people or the situation in your film with integrity. So Sonia Childress says, "We find that what belies beyond empathy is solidarity. The notion that our plight and humanity are intrinsically connected, and to create a better future, I've got to get my hands dirty along with you." This is why the collaborative impact strategy is really so important. For me, this is also why it's important that positionality, intention and integrity is made very clear with these documentaries. Collaboration with your protagonists, in my opinion, is very key in this kind of filmmaking, as you will work together with them in solidarity and partnership to achieve the outcomes that are needed long after the film is finished. The trick is to know what your film is before you can develop a strategy, or what we call an impact campaign, in order to drive that change. How I like to see it is that your film is a living, breathing entity, and the impact campaign you develop during and after the film's release is a completely new being that can change and move as you keep going and learning. The impact campaign can be strategized within and in tandem to the more traditional distribution channels of a film. The film then becomes a tool in the impact, which will hopefully continue and will outgrow the film. This is also where you can get an impact producer on board, and as you as the filmmaker can decide, do you want to hand over the film completely for impact and move on to other projects, or would you like to be involved in the activism yourself? Doc Society gave us this great table to fill out, and if you are interested in this, I urge you to use this as an exercise. It's the big picture, it's the wish list. You write down everything that you want, and then you figure out what works for you when you're ready. and you reach out to various partner organizations before the release and see what you can set up. It's really important to have a team of qualified people around you, especially if your film has the potential to ruffle feathers. So in order to really understand how deeply a film may drive change, we really need to understand the environment that the film is entering, which is the story environment. There's this cool graph that Doc Society created to see where your film fits in and how to approach the impact. So you need to develop firstly how well-known or unknown a story is, as well as the resistance to that story in order to create a strategy. While many documentaries investigate, reveal, spotlight, and humanize, they tend to have a dominant emphasis. If you set that against the environment into which they are releasing the film, you can really gain insight into the kind of change they hope to achieve. This graph is really helpful because it shows how it's important not only to gauge what kind of impact and how to strategize the impact campaign for maximum impact once the film's released, but also how to actually film and develop the story in production to support your impact goals. And we can analyze it like this. Does the film take on a relatively well-known or an unknown subject? Is there a strong or well-resourced opposition against the film's messages or weak or divided opponents? So in some fresh environments where people are really unaware of the problem and no one is fighting against you, success is causing a sea of change in public opinion, triggering new laws to be written, compelling companies to publicly apologize. But this isn't always possible given the external restraints. No matter how brilliant the film and the campaign can be, in entrenched environments, moving the dial just 1 degree is really a huge achievement and worth all the effort. The biggest takeaway that I'd like to impart is really the power of partnerships. As the filmmaker, you're a really small cog in a very large machine. In addition to the protagonists in your film, you will need partnerships in civil society, NPOs, government, in some instances, industry, the legal fraternity, etc., in order to really make this work. You need to almost develop an army of people around you and around the film that will take it and use it to protect your protagonist and the film and fulfill your impact goals. Let's see some examples of how films have done their impact in different ways. So the first example I'll chat about is Blackfish. So Blackfish is an environmental film, and it tells the story of Tilikum, a performing killer whale that killed several people while in captivity. Along the way, the film's director and producer compiles shocking footage and emotional interviews to explore the creature's extraordinary nature, the species' cruel treatment in captivity, the lives and losses of the trainers, and the pressures brought to bear by the multi-billion-dollar sea park industry. So Blackfish premiered at Sundance, and with partners of the cast of ex-SeaWorld trainers, the Humane Society, PETA, Voice of the Orcas, etc., the film really began trending worldwide. The partners used the hashtags #Blackfish, #Blackfish on CNN, and this trended, and even celebrities like Ariana Grande and Stephen Fry also helped spread the word. As the noise around Blackfish continued, there is evidence that this mass awareness had started to translate into behavioral change on the part of the corporations and the general public. A year after the film was released, 8 out of 10 originally scheduled musical acts pulled out of SeaWorld's Orlando brands, citing the documentary. Also, a major shareholder, Blackstone, reduced their stake from 43% to 25% with SeaWorld. This followed a 13% drop in attendance and a shareholder class action lawsuit. And all this has been called the Blackfish effect. This film sits quite nicely in the reveal category, as it was able to make such a big change and really change the behavior of consumers. Kind of lift the veil behind the mask of these shows. Okay, cool. So let's move on to my film, Strike a Rock, and we can decide where it fits into this. My film is really about how after the Marikana massacre shook the foundations of the poverty-stricken mining community Marikana, two grandmothers lead their community in a historic fight against seemingly insurmountable odds for justice and dignity. It's a really intimate story where the personal becomes political, and it shows how these women take on Goliath enemies and make their voices heard. So if we look at this graph again, you have a story based in Marikana, which is arguably one of the worst human rights violations since apartheid, completely oversaturated in our national consciousness and in media. Many debates and differing opinions, really until a film like Miners Shot Down came out that managed to change the perceptions of how the massacre was seen in discourse, which is also a brilliant example of an impact campaign, and I urge you to check it out. However, my angle in telling the story and why I started to make the film in the first place is to try and expose how the aftermath and the voices of the women surrounding the mine and the women activists who had supported the mine workers and resisted management had really not been told and almost left out of history. I also wanted to explore and investigate the legal obligations that the company had to the community. So that's the story environment. Secondly, when you talk about possible resistance, you're talking about Goliath enemies. You're talking about the third largest platinum producer in the world and the South African government. It's definitely an entrenched issue, which makes things a little harder, but it's also teetering towards a hidden issue, as the woman of Marikana's story had never been told, as well as the obligations that the mine had to the community that could have meant their mining license withdrawn hadn't been explored on film at the time. A while ago, while I was making Striker Rock, I was asked if I wanted to make an impact film or an artistic festival film, and I never really understood why I can't do both. For me, aesthetic is political, and using the cinema and artistry of the form can often drive a message more powerfully. It became a very collaborative process. So this is why it was very important to spend so much time in the community and to tell a very intimate and close story from the inside out. I really tried to use the lyrical and artistic nature of cinema as a political aesthetic. The way that the film tries to focus on texture, on intimate moments between grandmother and granddaughter, and the relationship between best friends, and more of an observational and sensitive style of filmmaking is what I tried to do in the aesthetic, which itself becomes political within the impact as well. So that has become what I will hope to be my life's work, is to really try and explore the intersection of art and impact in documentary storytelling and using the form to create change. So I had an incredible impact team led by Matumeka, my Primrose, myself, Jackie Lee Katz and Kathleen Hardy, who was one of the lawyers at the Commission of Inquiry and represented the women of Sikhala Sonke. Our impact goals were changing structures. We wanted to try and put pressure on Lonmin to comply with its legal obligations and promote sustainable socioeconomic development for the Marikana community. We tried to raise public awareness by mobilizing civil society and policymakers and accountability structures. We tried to build communities and to show that Marikana is not dissimilar to other mining affected communities, and therefore we aim to try and build the capacity of the women's group Sikhala Sonke in the film and other grassroots feminist organizations around the country. We wanted our film to be part of an already existing wave of activism around Marikana, of NPOs, civil society, legal NGOs and support campaigns that were already doing the most amazing work on the ground to try and create change. So being a film though, it really provided us with a new and exciting audience and strategy for the story to reach different audiences in an emotive way. We had our premiere at Encounters and went on to a festival run, which included broadcast and theatrical. And with the traditional release, we premiered at Sheffield Doc Fest and we went to IDFA and won a few awards. And this really allowed us prestige and credibility, which helped promote the Impact campaign. The Impact campaign and the film coexist, feeding off one another, and the film becomes a tool for the Impact as we release the Impact campaign at the same time as a traditional distribution. We launched it as a bottom-up approach, gaining enough momentum to try and apply the pressure that we spoke about and our impact goals. So we did this in a few ways. On our website, we invited people to organize their own screenings, which meant that anyone can contact us and organize a screening. We provided them with a screening pack to screen to their friends, local and international not-for-profit organizations, large corporate entities, private individuals, universities, institutions, community projects, to really try and get the film out there as grassroots as possible. Each screening pack included marketing material for the film, the Sikhala Sonke petition, attendance registers, and feedback, so we can try and track the people who watched the film and any discussion that was had. So at many of these screenings as possible, Tumeka and Primrose, the two protagonists in the film, would travel with the film and lead the discussions after the screenings. It was really important to me and to the team that they led the impact from the front, as they'd been doing that on the ground for all these years anyway. All these screenings were achieved really through partners such as Sunshine Cinema, Chushimani Center for Activist Education, Amnesty International, Oxfam, Masimanyane Women's Rights International, and more. In 2017, myself, Matumeka, and my Primrose were invited to a 6-day screening tour of the UK. This was on the anniversary of the 5th year since the Marikana massacre. We were outside London's headquarters in the UK and the South African High Commission picketing. They didn't come down, but it allowed us to publicly support and put pressure. So because of this initiative, and by being flexible and by really learning heavy lessons as we went along, we were able to have 80+ screenings around the world, grassroots screenings. We screened in over 15 cities around the world, 8 universities, and the film has now been placed in multiple curriculums around the world. Furthermore, we also managed to raise some money and give donations for Sikhala Sonke to keep them sustainable with the Food Garden project and other projects. We've also had hundreds of people sign their petition worldwide, and through our UK tour, we managed to build a branch of Sikhala Sonke in London for support. So you also never know how the film will make an impact. For example, at a Lawyers for Human Rights screening, the Department of Mineral Resources were in the room, which we didn't realize. And a week after the screening, they had sent an ultimatum to Lonman to comply with their social labor plans, or their license would be taken away. We don't know whether this was related to the film or not, but at least it was progress. Also, after the film's release, Ben Magara, the CEO of Lonman, asked to meet with the women of Sikhala Sonke to discuss their demands. The second part of our impact campaign consisted of a series of community-based screenings in mining-affected communities, where the women of Sikhala Sonke had a community exchange. This series formed part of what the Centre of Applied Legal Studies and Action Aids project to educate mining-affected communities around South Africa on their rights and responsibilities when it comes to social labor plans and what mining companies owe them. Striker Rock was screened alongside a array of talks to build knowledge and rights education for these communities, and we managed to do this in Sekhukhune, Fochville and Somkhele. In addition to talking about SLPs, Sikhala Sonke managed to reignite some feminist women's groups in these mining-affected communities, as well as have some feminist workshops with partners such as Women in Mining. Of course, there is still a lot of more change and more impact and work that needs to be done around the space of Marikana. The struggle continues, but we hope at least that our film managed to help a little bit. So that's really my experience of impact filmmaking in a nutshell. I know that many people do it in different ways, but I hope that this was helpful and that it really introduced you to the power of film, if these are the kinds of films that you're interested in making.